The rain pounded against my face as I stood there, suitcase in hand, staring at the locked door of what was supposed to be my home. My mother-in-law's face appeared in the window, her smile cold and triumphant as she mouthed the words, "You're not welcome here anymore." What she didn't know, she'd just made the biggest mistake of her life. 2 months later, I watched as Lorraine Whitmore stood trembling before the Women's Association she once ruled, her perfectly maintained facade crumbling as the president read aloud the findings of their investigation. Emotional abuse, unlawful eviction, manipulation. The whispers spread through the crowd like wildfire, the mighty Lorraine finally exposed for what she truly was. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Have you ever trusted someone who was supposed to be family, only to discover they were secretly trying to destroy you? It's not just the betrayal that cuts deep. It's the realization that while you were playing by the rules, they were playing an entirely different game. My name is Harper Quinn, and the night I stood locked out of my own home in the pouring rain wasn't the end of my story. It was just the beginning. What followed was a masterclass in consequences, a lesson my mother-in-law never saw coming until it was too late. If you've ever dealt with toxic in-laws or wondered what real revenge looks like, you're going to want to watch this entire story unfold. Hit subscribe now so you don't miss any of our revenge tales, and let me know in the comments if you've ever had to deal with a nightmare mother-in-law. Trust me, some of the stories you share might help someone else realize they're not alone. Now let me take you back to how it all began, back when I still believed that love could conquer all, even the most manipulative mother-in-law in Willow Creek. I met Mason Whitmore on a perfect summer evening at my friend Zoe's backyard barbecue. He was manning the grill, sleeves rolled up, telling some ridiculous story that had everyone around him laughing. Our eyes met across the yard, and I swear time slowed down for a moment. It was like something from a movie. You know, the kind you roll your eyes at, but secretly wish would happen to you. "You must be Harper," he said when Zoe finally introduced us. "Zoe's been talking about her talented photographer friend for weeks." His smile was genuine, reaching all the way to his eyes, and we ended up talking until the stars came out. Mason was different from anyone I'd dated before, grounded, thoughtful, and completely comfortable in his own skin. By the end of the night, we discovered our shared love of hiking remote trails, watching terrible sci-fi movies just to critique them, and a mutual addiction to late-night documentaries about literally anything. Our first date turned into our second, then our fifth, then our 20th. Within 6 months, I was practically living at his apartment. When he proposed on the summit of Ravens Peak at sunrise, I didn't hesitate for a second. "My family's going to adore you," he promised, kissing me as I admired the vintage ring on my finger. "Especially my mum. She's been asking to meet you for months." And when I finally met Lorraine Whitmore, she seemed like everything Mason had described. She welcomed me with a warm hug in her immaculate home, a beautiful colonial-style house that had been in the Whitmore family for generations. "Mason has told me so much about your photography," she said, serving homemade apple pie on delicate china plates. "It's so creative to make a living that way." I didn't catch the slight edge in her voice then, or maybe I did, but chose to ignore it. Over the following weeks, Lorraine was the picture of maternal warmth. She invited me for lunch, asked about my family, and even framed one of my photographs for her hallway. But there were moments, brief, fleeting moments, when the mask would slip. "You're so independent, Harper," she'd say, her smile tight. "I hope you'll have time for a family with your career." Or, "Mason's always loved traditional girls. It's sweet how he's branched out with you." Each comment landed like a paper cut, small enough to dismiss, but sharp enough to sting. Mason would squeeze my hand and change the subject, and I'd tell myself I was overreacting. Our wedding was a dream. Or it should have been. Lorraine volunteered to help plan, which quickly turned into Lorraine taking over. The venue I loved was too unconventional. The caterer I wanted was overpriced. The simple dress I fell in love with was not befitting a Whitmore bride. I gave in. After all, I told myself. It was just one day. What mattered was that Mason and I would be together. But beneath her smile, I should have seen what was coming. The way she clutched Mason's arm during our first dance, the way she accidentally spilled wine on my dress during the reception. Little signs I chose to ignore. When Mason suggested we move into the Whitmore family home to save for our own place, I agreed. It was temporary after all, just a few months to build our nest egg. I had no idea I was walking straight into the lion's den. Moving into the Whitmore family home felt like stepping into a museum where I wasn't allowed to touch the exhibits. The house was beautiful. Original hardwood floors, crown moulding, family heirlooms displayed in glass cabinets. But from the moment we carried our boxes through the front door, I sensed I was a visitor, not a resident. "I've prepared the blue room for you two," Lorraine announced, leading us upstairs. "I know you mentioned the sunroom would be perfect for your photography work, Harper, but I've actually set up my new sewing station there. The basement has plenty of space for your equipment." Mason squeezed my hand and whispered, "It's just temporary, remember? 6 months, tops." I nodded and smiled, determined to make this work. After all, Mason had lived here his entire life. This was his comfort zone, and I wanted to respect that. Plus, the financial benefits were undeniable. We'd save enough for a down payment on our own place in no time. But the cracks appeared almost immediately. The first week, I came home from a photo shoot to find my toiletries reorganized in the bathroom. My organic face wash and moisturizers had been tucked away in a drawer, replaced by Lorraine's brand of skincare products. "I just tidied up a bit," she said when I mentioned it. The counter was getting cluttered. Then came the family dinner, where Lorraine forgot to tell me that Mason's relatives were coming over. I arrived home from work to find a formal dining scene unfolding, still in my jeans and t-shirt. "Oh dear," Lorraine said, eyes wide with mock concern. "Didn't Mason tell you? I'm sure I asked him to." "Well, you can quickly change, can't you? Unless that's how photographers dress for dinner these days." Mason's cousin Bethany smirked. I changed clothes with burning cheeks. The incidents multiplied. My almond milk disappeared from the refrigerator because it was taking up space. The laundry I'd left in the dryer was removed before it was dry because I needed to run a quick load. The framed print of Mason and me from our engagement shoot mysteriously moved from our bedside table to the back of a bookshelf. Can you imagine having someone rearrange your life, your space, your belongings, all while claiming they're doing it to help you? This is how control disguises itself as care. Each incident so small that complaining makes you seem petty, yet the cumulative effect is devastating. The breaking point came 3 months into our stay. I'd been commissioned to shoot a wedding catalogue, my biggest contract yet. I'd set up my equipment in the basement the night before, lights, backdrops, camera gear, all carefully arranged. When I went down the next morning to do test shots, everything was gone. I found my $3,000 camera and lenses stacked haphazardly in a cardboard box. My lighting equipment had been disassembled, the backdrop fabric folded incorrectly, creasing the delicate material. "Mum, you can't just move Harper's professional equipment," Mason said when I showed him, his voice strained but non-confrontational. "Well, I needed to have the carpets cleaned," Lorraine replied, hands clasped innocently. The basement was getting musty. I was very careful with her things. "My backdrop is ruined," I said quietly. "I have a shoot tomorrow." "Can't you just use a bedsheet?" Lorraine suggested. "Or take pictures outside. It's much more natural anyway." That night, I cried silently in the shower. Mason held me in bed and promised things would get better, but his words rang hollow. He was trapped between his wife and his mother, and he wasn't strong enough to take a definitive stand. I started keeping my cameras in the trunk of my car. I took on more assignments that kept me out of the house. I began to dread coming home, my stomach knotting as I turned onto Maple Avenue. What had once been our plan for financial freedom had become my emotional prison. Each day I felt less like Mason's wife and more like an unwelcome houseguest whose presence was merely tolerated. The woman who'd once photographed mountain vistas and felt on top of the world now walked on eggshells in her own home, shrinking smaller with each passing day. The email arrived on a Tuesday afternoon. I was editing photos in the basement when my phone chimed with a notification that would change everything. Marissa Winters, editor-in-chief at Luminous magazine, wanted me as their new lead photographer. Luminous wasn't just any magazine, it was the publication that had inspired me to become a photographer in the first place. The position came with creative freedom, industry recognition, and a salary that would finally let Mason and me afford our own home. My hands were shaking as I called Mason. "That's incredible, babe," he exclaimed. "I'm so proud of you." His enthusiasm warmed my heart, but a shadow of doubt crept in. There's just one thing. I'd need to travel for assignments sometimes. Not often, but maybe a week each month. There was a slight pause before Mason said, "We'll make it work. This is your dream." I wanted to believe him. That night I cooked a special dinner, planning to share my news with Lorraine in the most positive way possible. Maybe, just maybe, this could be a turning point in our relationship. I'd barely finished announcing my offer when Lorraine's fork clattered against her plate. "Travel? For a week every month?" Her voice was quiet, but her eyes had turned to ice. "And who exactly will take care of this household while you're off taking pictures?" "Mum, it's not like that," Mason started. "This is a huge opportunity for Harper." "I understand it's important," I added carefully, "but it's also temporary. The travel assignments would only be for the first year and—" "Important?" Lorraine cut me off. "What's important is family. What's important is being there for your husband. You've been married less than a year, and you're already choosing your career over Mason." "That's not fair," I said, feeling heat rise to my face. "I'm not choosing one over the other. I can have both." Lorraine laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. "That's the problem with your generation. You think you can have everything without sacrificing anything. In my day, women understood their priorities." "Times have changed, Mom," Mason interjected, his voice strained. "Have they?" Lorraine's gaze fixed on me like a predator. "Tell me, Harper, who will cook Mason's meals when you're gone? Who will make sure he has clean clothes? Who will keep him company in the evenings?" "Mason is a grown man," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. "He managed before he met me, and we'll manage together now." The tension in the room was suffocating. Mason shifted uncomfortably in his chair, his eyes darting between his mother and me. "I see." Lorraine folded her napkin with deliberate precision. "Well, I think you need to make a choice, Harper. It's really very simple. Choose your career or your marriage. You can't have both." "What would you do if someone tried to make you choose between your dreams and your love?" Drop a comment below with what you'd have done in my place. The ultimatum hung in the air like a guillotine. Mason said nothing. Absolutely nothing to defend me or our marriage. His silence hurt more than Lorraine's words. "That's not her decision to make," I finally said, looking directly at Mason, silently begging him to stand with me. "I think everyone needs to calm down," he mumbled. Ever the peacemaker. Ever the coward. "Let's talk about this when we're not so emotional." In that moment, I saw with perfect clarity that Mason was as trapped as I was, caught between the woman he loved and the woman who had controlled him his entire life. The difference was that I recognized the trap. He didn't even know he was in one. I accepted the job the next morning. If you're finding this story relatable, give this video a like right now. It helps more people find these stories and realize they're not alone in dealing with toxic family members. Because what happened next made that dinner confrontation look like a friendly chat. Thursday started like any other day, except for the storm clouds gathering on the horizon. My first official assignment for Luminous was a nighttime shoot capturing the city's historic district lit up against the twilight sky. The rain held off until I was nearly finished, then came down in sheets, forcing me to pack up my equipment early. By the time I pulled into the driveway, it was past 10 p.m. I was soaked through despite my umbrella, my camera bag tucked protectively inside my coat. The house was mostly dark, save for a soft light in the living room. I assumed Mason was waiting up for me, maybe with a cup of tea and that gentle smile that still made my heart skip. I inserted my key into the lock and turned it. Nothing happened. I tried again, jiggling the key, thinking perhaps the old lock was sticking because of the rain. Still nothing. That's when I noticed this wasn't the same lock. It had been changed. I rang the doorbell once, twice, 3 times. I knocked, then pounded on the door, the sound barely audible over the thundering rain. I called Mason's phone straight to voicemail. "Mason!" I shouted, peering through the windows. "Mason, are you there? The door's locked." That's when I saw movement in the living room. Not Mason. Lorraine. She approached the window slowly, deliberately, and pulled back the curtain just enough to reveal her face. Her expression was cold, triumphant even, illuminated by the soft lamplight behind her. "Lorraine, the lock's been changed," I said, rain streaming down my face, mixing with the first tears of confusion. "Let me in, please. I'm soaked." She smiled, not the practiced social smile she wore in public, but something truly chilling. "You're not welcome here anymore," she said, her voice muffled through the glass, but clear enough. "Go back to your job, your friends, your so-called independence. This is my house, and I decide who stays." "What are you talking about? Where's Mason?" My voice broke as panic set in. "This is my home too. You can't just lock me out." "Mason is asleep. He knows you've chosen your career over him. Why do you think he isn't here defending you? He finally sees you for what you are. Selfish, career-obsessed, not wife material." "That's a lie," I was shouting now, not caring if the neighbours heard. "Let me talk to him." "He doesn't want to talk to you." Her words dripped with venom. "Your things are on the porch. Take them and go." She released the curtain and disappeared back into the depths of the house. I stood there, rain pelting me, thunder cracking overhead, my world collapsing in real time. That's when I saw it, my suitcase, neatly placed under the porch overhang. I opened it with trembling hands to find my clothes folded inside, along with a few personal items. My wedding photo was conspicuously absent. My photography books, my journals, my childhood teddy bear, all missing. She'd packed only what she deemed necessary, erasing all evidence of who I truly was. I called Mason again and again. Texts went unanswered. I finally called Zoe, who came immediately to pick me up, finding me huddled against the garage door, mascara streaking down my face, clutching my suitcase and camera bag. That night, on Zoe's pull-out couch, I cycled through every emotion possible. Shock, grief, abandonment, humiliation. How could Mason let this happen? How could he not call? Not check if I was safe? Had he truly chosen his mother over me, or was he another victim of her manipulation? I stared at the ceiling until dawn, the storm both outside and within me, finally quieting into a strange, dangerous calm. Imagine being literally locked out of your own life. What would you do next? Would you crumble, or would you plan? I woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar curtains, momentarily disoriented before the memories of the night before came crashing back. The locked door, the rain, Lorraine's cold smile through the window. My phone showed 17 missed calls from various friends, but nothing, absolutely nothing, from Mason. At 8:17 a.m., I finally called him. 3 rings, then his groggy voice. "Hello? Mason." My voice was steadier than I expected. "Care to explain why your mother changed the locks and left me standing in the rain last night?" A long pause. Then, "Harper, where are you?" "Mum said you packed a bag and left. She said you told her the pressure was too much and you needed space." The blood drained from my face. "That's what she told you. Mason, she locked me out. She changed the locks while I was at work. My suitcase was already packed and waiting on the porch." "What? No, that can't be right." His confusion sounded genuine, but there was something else in his voice. Fear. "Mum wouldn't do that." "She did, Mason. I was pounding on the door. I called you repeatedly." My phone was off. Mom said the charger in our room was acting up, so she plugged it in downstairs. He paused. Harper, this is crazy. Let me talk to her. I'll fix this. Fix this? I echoed, a hollow laugh escaping me. Mason, your mother illegally evicted me from my home. She lied to you about why I wasn't there, and your response is that you'll fix this? What do you want me to do? She's my mother. And there it was, the truth finally spoken aloud. And I'm your wife, I said quietly. Or did you forget that part? Another silence. Just give me time to sort this out. Don't do anything rash. Don't do anything rash, I repeated. Like what? Stand up for myself? Expect my husband to stand up for me? Harper, please, I'm caught in the middle here. No, Mason, you put yourself in the middle. You could have chosen a side at any point. You still can. I ended the call and sat motionless, a strange calm washing over me. That was the moment something inside me changed. The old Harper died in the rain that night. The woman who woke up the next morning, she was someone Lorraine would soon wish she'd never crossed. Zoe found me an hour later at her kitchen table, laptop open, legal pads spread around me, making notes with methodical precision. You look different, she said, setting down a cup of coffee beside me. I feel different, I replied without looking up. I've been researching tenant rights. Did you know that even without a formal lease, I'm legally considered a tenant in that house? What Lorraine did isn't just cruel, it's illegal. So what are you going to do? Zoe asked, sliding into the chair opposite me. Everything, I said simply. But first, I need to understand exactly what I'm dealing with. That afternoon, I met with a lawyer who specialized in family law. She confirmed what I'd suspected. I had grounds for legal action against Lorraine for illegal eviction and possibly emotional abuse. You're not the first daughter-in-law I've seen in this situation, she told me, passing me a business card. There's a support group that meets at the community centre on Thursdays. Women with similar experiences. They might have resources that could help you. The support group changed everything. 12 women, ranging from their 20s to their 60s, all with stories that echoed mine. Controlling mothers-in-law, passive husbands, systematic isolation, gaslighting, eviction. Some had fought back and won. Others had walked away. All had survived. The mistake most women make, said Diana, a silver-haired woman who'd become the group's unofficial leader, is thinking this is just a personal problem. It's not. It's about power, control, and a system that enables it. You need to fight fire with fire. I left that meeting with contacts, resources, and a clarity I hadn't felt in months. At Zoe's kitchen table that night, I mapped out a strategy that would use Lorraine's own weapons against her. Her obsession with social standing, her community involvement, her carefully cultivated image. The victim who'd stood crying in the rain was gone. In her place sat a strategist, methodically planning a campaign that would not just get me justice, but would ensure Lorraine Whitmore never did this to anyone else again. Sun Tzu said, "If you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles." After 5 months of living under Lorraine's roof, I knew my enemy intimately. Her strengths, her weaknesses, her pressure points, I'd catalogued them all during my time in her domain. Lorraine Whitmore had 3 primary vulnerabilities. First, her social standing. Lorraine wasn't just active in the community. Her identity was built around being respected, admired, and somewhat feared. The president of the Women's Association, the organizer of charity galas, the unofficial social gatekeeper of Willow Creek. Her power came from her reputation. Second, her need for control. Lorraine couldn't handle situations she didn't orchestrate. Unpredictability made her reckless, and recklessness made her sloppy. Third, her deep fear of exposure. Despite her outward confidence, Lorraine was terrified people would discover the truth behind her perfect facade. The more I thought about it, the more I realized Lorraine had likely done this before. I couldn't be the first. Have you ever reached a breaking point where you realized the only way forward was to completely dismantle the power structure someone built to hurt you? That's not vengeance. That's justice. My plan would attack all three vulnerabilities simultaneously. Phase 1. Evidence collection. I needed irrefutable proof of Lorraine's behaviour. I still had text messages where she'd made subtle threats and passive-aggressive comments, photos I'd taken of my belongings after she'd moved them. But I needed more: witness statements, documentation of the lockout, evidence of systematic emotional abuse. Phase 2. Community exposure. The Women's Association was Lorraine's power base. If I could show them who she truly was, her social standing would crumble. Phase 3. Legal action. A formal complaint would force Lorraine to answer for her actions in an environment she couldn't control. I started with evidence. I drove past the house when I knew Lorraine would be at her weekly hair appointment and spoke with our neighbours. Mrs. Patterson across the street had seen everything that rainy night. Me pounding on the door, Lorraine at the window, the suitcase on the porch. She'd been horrified, but hadn't known what to do. "I've always thought something wasn't right with that woman," she confessed, signing the witness statement I'd prepared. "The way she talks about you when you're not around. It's not normal." 3 more neighbours provided similar statements. Then I contacted Mason's cousin Bethany, who had always seemed to see through Lorraine's act. To my surprise, she eagerly agreed to meet. Lorraine did the same thing to Mason's college girlfriend, Bethany revealed over coffee, and before that she drove away his high school girlfriend by constantly criticising her. "It's a pattern. She can't stand any woman who takes Mason's attention away from her." Bethany provided dates, details, even the name and contact information of Mason's ex from college. When I called Alexis, she broke down crying. "I thought it was my fault all these years," she whispered. "Mason just let it happen. He said he'd fix things, but he never did." With mounting evidence, I moved to Phase 2. Through the Women's Support Group, I made contact with Eleanor Simmons, the Vice President of the Women's Association, where Lorraine reigned supreme. "We've had concerns about Lorraine's behaviour," Eleanor admitted cautiously when we met. "Complaints from younger members about her bullying tactics. But no one's been willing to speak up officially." I laid out my evidence: the photos, the witness statements, the pattern of behaviour. Eleanor's professional demeanour cracked. "This goes beyond bullying," she said quietly. "This is abuse. The association has a zero-tolerance policy, but we'll need you to make a formal statement to the board." For Phase 3, my journalist friend Marissa from Luminous magazine connected me with her sister, who ran a popular blog focusing on women's issues and community action. "We don't need to name names publicly yet," Marissa explained. "But an anonymous article about mother-in-law abuse, highlighting the legal implications and community response, that would set the stage." The article went live 2 days before I filed my legal complaint against Lorraine for illegal eviction, emotional abuse, and property damage. The timing wasn't coincidental. By the time Lorraine was served papers, the community was already buzzing about toxic mother-in-law syndrome and legal responsibilities within family homes. I scheduled my testimony to the Women's Association board for the day after Lorraine would receive the legal notice. The trap was set: multiple angles of attack, no easy escape routes, and a spotlight Lorraine couldn't possibly dodge. This is where things get really interesting. If you haven't subscribed yet, do it now so you don't miss the moment when all of Harper's planning comes together. Because when Lorraine realised what was happening, her reaction would set in motion a chain of events that would change both our lives forever. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. Mine came with a side of justice, served in public, with the entire community as witnesses. The morning after filing my legal complaint, I woke to dozens of messages. The anonymous article had gone viral locally, with women across town sharing their own experiences with controlling in-laws. By noon, 3 more former girlfriends of Mason's had contacted me, each with nearly identical stories of Lorraine's manipulation and sabotage. When Lorraine was served the legal papers that afternoon, she made her first critical mistake. She called Eleanor Simmons, attempting to use her influence to handle this misunderstanding. What she didn't know was that Eleanor had already scheduled an emergency board meeting of the Women's Association for the following evening. "You should have seen her face when she walked into that boardroom," Eleanor told me later. "She thought she was there to discuss the spring fundraiser. Instead, she found the entire board waiting with copies of your evidence file." The association's investigation was swift and devastating. They interviewed the neighbours, Mason's relatives, and even the locksmith who'd changed the locks, who confirmed Lorraine had claimed it was because her unstable daughter-in-law had threatened her. By the end of the week, the board had reached a unanimous decision. Lorraine was suspended from all association activities, pending a formal ethics review. But that was just the beginning. 2 police officers appeared at the Whitmore home the following Monday, responding to my complaint of illegal eviction. Standing on the porch where I'd once been locked out, they questioned Lorraine about her actions that night. Neighbours peered from windows and slowed their cars driving by, watching as Willow Creek's social queen was reduced to stammering excuses to uniformed officers. "She claimed I'd abandoned the home voluntarily," I told the detective assigned to my case. "She lied to my husband about where I was, took my key, changed the locks, and packed my belongings without permission." The detective nodded. "We've seen cases like this before, Mrs. Whitmore. What makes yours unusual is the documentation you've provided. Most victims don't have this level of evidence." Mason hadn't called me in days. I later learned that Lorraine had convinced him I was having some kind of breakdown, that I was lashing out because I couldn't balance my career and marriage. But when the police investigation began, when neighbours started talking, when the Women's Association suspended his mother, reality finally cracked through his denial. He showed up at Zoe's apartment unannounced, pale and shaken. "Is it true?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "All of it? The locksmith, the neighbours, your clothes packed before you even came home that night?" I handed him my evidence file wordlessly. He sat on Zoe's couch for 2 hours, reading every statement, viewing every photo, seeing the pattern that stretched back to his teenage years. "I didn't know," he kept saying. "I mean, I knew some things, but I didn't connect. I never thought, oh God, Harper, what has she done? What have I done?" The look on Lorraine's face when she realised her reputation was collapsing around her. I'll never forget it. But this isn't even the most satisfying part of what happened next. Lorraine's first instinct was to play victim, a strategy that had worked her entire life. She called an impromptu press conference on her front lawn, tears streaming perfectly down her face as she claimed she was being persecuted by a vindictive daughter-in-law who couldn't accept traditional family values. Her performance might have worked, except for one detail. Mason was standing beside me at the courthouse that same morning, holding my hand as we filed additional documentation. "My mother has a pattern of controlling and manipulative behaviour," he told the judge, his voice shaking but determined. "I enabled it by my silence, and my wife suffered because of it. I'm here to support her case and to make things right." With her son's defection, Lorraine's support system crumbled completely. The court ordered her to attend mandatory counselling for emotional abuse. The Women's Association voted to permanently revoke her membership. 3 separate community organisations asked her to step down from their boards. The final blow came when the court ruled in my favour, finding Lorraine guilty of illegal eviction and harassment. She was ordered to pay damages and legal fees, and a restraining order prevented her from coming within 100 feet of me. But the most powerful moment wasn't the legal victory or the community condemnation. It was the town hall meeting where Lorraine was required, as part of the settlement, to make a public apology. Standing at the podium, her perfectly coiffed hair unable to hide her humiliation, Lorraine Whitmore, the woman who had tried to destroy me, had to acknowledge her actions before the very community whose opinion she valued above all else. "I apologise for my behaviour toward Harper Quinn Whitmore," she read from a prepared statement, each word clearly painful. My actions were inappropriate, harmful, and illegal. I am seeking help to address my controlling tendencies and boundary issues. As she spoke, I felt no triumph, no glee, only relief that the truth had finally come to light, and that maybe, just maybe, she wouldn't be able to hurt anyone else this way again. 6 months after the courthouse showdown, Mason and I stood in the empty living room of our new apartment, surrounded by unpacked boxes and the golden afternoon light streaming through chantatique, uncurtained windows. "What do you think?" Mason asked, slipping his arm around my waist. "Worth the wait." It wasn't a luxury condo or a sprawling house, just a modest two-bedroom on the other side of town with scuffed hardwood floors and slightly outdated appliances. But it was ours. Truly ours. No hovering presence, no rearranged belongings, no walking on eggshells. "It's perfect," I whispered, leaning into him. The months following Lorraine's public apology had been challenging in different ways. Mason and I had started couples therapy, working through the damage done not just by his mother, but by his years of passive enablement. There were difficult conversations, painful realizations, and some nights when we wondered if our marriage could survive the aftershocks. But something unexpected happened along the way. Our relationship deepened. The foundation, once built on love but cracked by conflict avoidance, was being rebuilt with honesty, boundaries, and true partnership. "I never stood up to her before you," Mason admitted one night during a session. "I never even realized I could." Meanwhile, my experience had sparked something new in me. The support group I'd originally joined for help became a place where I could offer guidance to others. Women in similar situations reached out after hearing about my case. I started a blog documenting the legal process for fighting back against family abuse, which eventually led to volunteer work at the local women's shelter. "You turned something terrible into something powerful," Zoe told me over coffee one afternoon. "Not everyone could do that." Then came the letter. It arrived 3 months after we'd moved into our new place, Lorraine's handwriting familiar and jarring, on a cream envelope with no return address. I let it sit unopened on our kitchen counter for 2 days before finally reading it. "I've been in therapy twice weekly," she wrote. "My counselor says I have narcissistic tendencies and control issues stemming from my own mother's abandonment. This doesn't excuse what I did to you, but I'm working to understand it. If you're willing, I would like to apologize to you in person someday. What would you do if the person who tried to destroy you suddenly wanted forgiveness? Would you give it? Could you?" I didn't respond immediately. Forgiveness, I was learning, isn't a single moment of magnanimity. It's a process, messy, non-linear, and deeply personal. "You don't owe her anything," Mason said when I showed him the letter. Not a response, not forgiveness. Nothing. He was right. I didn't. But after weeks of contemplation, I realized that holding on to the anger was only keeping Lorraine's influence alive in my life. I agreed to meet her, not at her house or ours, but on neutral ground, a cafe downtown with Mason waiting nearby. She looked smaller somehow, less intimidating. The counselling had clearly taken a toll, stripping away some of her perfectly maintained facade. "I'm sorry," she said simply when we sat down. No excuses, no qualifiers. I didn't offer instant forgiveness or promises of reconciliation. Instead, I told her the truth. "I'm working on it. Forgiveness takes time." It wasn't the fairy tale ending where enemies become friends. It was something messier, more authentic, and ultimately more healing. Two imperfect people acknowledging harm and the long road to repair. 2 years have passed since that rainy night when I stood locked out of what I thought was my home. Looking back, I realise now that I never truly had a home there, just a temporary shelter in someone else's kingdom. Family, I've learned, isn't defined by blood or legal documents. It's built through respect, mutual support, and the courage to set boundaries. The people who stood by me during my darkest moments, Zoe who opened her home without question, Eleanor who believed me when it would have been easier not to, the women in my support group who shared their stories, they showed me what family really means. Once a month, I return to that same support group, not as a member seeking help, but as a speaker offering it. The circle of women has grown larger, their faces a mixture of pain and determination as I share what I've learned. Document everything, I tell them, holding up the evidence binder that changed my life. Abusers rely on your silence and the world's disbelief. Every text, every email, every witness, these are the weapons that will set you free. Most importantly, I explain how standing up for yourself creates ripples you never expected. Since my case became public, the local court has streamlined its process for handling family eviction cases. The Women's Association created a support fund for members facing similar situations. 3 other women successfully challenged their own abusive in-laws, using my case as precedent. Mason and I are still finding our way, learning to communicate honestly and build a relationship based on partnership rather than expectation or obligation. Sometimes healing comes with scars, but they remind us of our resilience. As for Lorraine, our relationship remains complicated. She continues her therapy and we maintain careful, limited contact. Forgiveness is an ongoing process, not a destination, something I work on not for her sake, but for my own peace. The rain that fell on me that night washing away the old Harper wasn't a tragedy, it was a baptism. Sometimes we need to be broken open before we can become who we're meant to be. If this story resonated with you, please hit like and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Subscribe to Nexus of Revenge for more stories of justice served and let me know in the comments. What's your definition of true family? I read every comment and can't wait to hear your thoughts, because your story matters too. Your boundaries matter. Your healing matters. And remember, sometimes the best revenge isn't about hurting others. It's about reclaiming your power and helping others find theirs. That rainy night didn't end my story, it was only the beginning.